The murder that solved another murder. The rain was still falling when Detective Samuel Hayes arrived at the scene. A narrow alley in the industrial part of Cleveland was lit only by flickering street lamps and the rotating blue and red of police cruisers. A man lay slumped against the wet brick wall, his shirt soaked in crimson. He looked young, maybe 25, but the bullet wound to his chest had aged him instantly. Hayes crouched, brushing his hand along the puddles near the victim. "Execution style," he muttered. "No wallet, no phone. Just a blood-stained envelope stuffed halfway into the victim's jacket pocket." The officer standing nearby leaned closer. "Sir, you should see this." Inside the envelope was a faded photograph, a black and white picture of a suburban house, taken decades earlier. On the back, scribbled in shaky ink, "He's still here." Hayes frowned. The photo looked like it belonged in an old case file, not on the body of a fresh victim. He pocketed it carefully. Something about it nagged at him. The alley itself offered little. No cameras, no witnesses willing to talk. But the precision of the shot suggested a professional, not a random killing. Someone had wanted this man silenced. The problem was silence from what? At the morgue, the victim was identified as Ethan Miller, a journalism student. No record, no known enemies. But his laptop, recovered from his apartment, was loaded with research files on unsolved murders from the 1970s. He had been digging into cold cases that even the department had long forgotten. One case stood out, the Harper Street murder, 1978. A young woman, 22, found strangled in her family's basement. No forced entry. No suspects ever charged. The case had faded into dust. Until now. Hayes opened the archived file. The crime scene photos were grainy but familiar. The same house. The same basement. The exact image Ethan had been carrying when he was killed. Something about it chilled Hayes more than the fresh corpse in the alley. Why had Ethan been carrying evidence from a murder that happened 40 years ago? The next day, Hayes drove to the Harper Street address. The house still stood, weathered paint, a collapsed porch, blinds drawn tight. Neighbors said an old man still lived there, alone, barely seen. His name, Richard Collins. When Hayes knocked, the door opened an inch. A pale eye peered through the crack. "I already told the boy everything," the old man rasped. "What boy?" Hayes asked. "The one who came last week," Collins said. His voice shook. "The one asking about Margaret." "Margaret Harper?" Collins didn't answer. The door shut with a finality that said Hayes would get no more out of him, at least not yet. Back at the precinct, Hayes traced Collins's history. He had lived in that house since the 70s. Neighbors described him as eccentric, sometimes hostile. No marriage, no children. But what stood out was a police note buried deep in the 1978 file. Collins had been questioned once. He was the Harper's neighbor. He claimed he'd seen nothing. Ethan Miller, the murdered student, had been emailing someone in the days before his death. The emails, recovered from his laptop, revealed a chilling exchange. Ethan had found a witness willing to confess. The final email read, "Meet me at Harper Street, 7 p.m. Wednesday. Bring no one." Wednesday was the night Ethan was killed. Hayes stared at the glowing screen. Whoever Ethan met that night didn't just silence him. They had buried two murders at once. The detective felt the walls of the case closing in. A 40-year-old crime had clawed its way back to the surface, leaving another body in its wake. But when Hayes returned to Harper Street, Collins's house was dark. The front door hung slightly open. Inside, the air smelled of mold and something metallic. In the basement, the wooden steps creaked under his boots. There, in the corner, under a rotting tarp, was a wooden trunk. Fresh scratches scarred the lock, as if someone had tried to open it recently. Hayes's pulse quickened as he forced it open. Inside was a collection of photographs, each one worse than the last. Polaroids of women, terrified, bound, their faces frozen in the grainy film. Some matched cold cases stretching back decades. But one photograph was different. It showed Ethan Miller, alive, sitting in the same basement, taken just days before his body was found in the alley. Hayes's breath caught in his throat. Ethan had not just been researching a cold case. He had stumbled directly into the lair of a predator who had been hunting for over 40 years. And Richard Collins, the quiet old neighbor, wasn't just a bystander. He was the thread tying both murders together. But the file in Hayes's hands contained something even more disturbing. At the bottom of the box was a list of names, scrawled in ink, with dates beside them. The last entry read, "Hayes, soon." Detective Hayes's hands shook as he stared at the final entry in that box of horrors. His own name. His own date. It wasn't just a list of past victims, it was a ledger, a record of every life Richard Collins had taken, and a chilling warning of who was next. Hayes backed away from the trunk, every creak of the basement boards echoing like a gunshot in his chest. His mind raced. Someone had written his name here, but when? And how long had Collins been watching him? Upstairs, a faint sound broke through the silence. The groan of a floorboard. Hayes spun, gun drawn, heart hammering. "Collins?" he barked, his voice rougher than he intended. "It's over." No answer. He climbed the stairs slowly, gun steady. The house seemed to breathe with him, shadows twitching against the peeling wallpaper. Then he saw it, the front door still ajar. Fresh mud smeared across the porch. Whoever had been there just moments ago was gone. The hunt was on. At the precinct, Hayes spread the Polaroids across the evidence table. The room filled with detectives, silent as their eyes moved from one grainy image to the next. Victims stretching back decades, most matching unsolved cases scattered across Ohio. "This man's been killing for 40 years under our noses," Hayes said. "And Miller found him before we did." Captain Alvarez pinched the bridge of his nose. "You're telling me this old man Collins has been operating since the 70s? Hayes nodded grimly. "And he's not done. Miller wasn't a random victim. He got too close. They dispatched units to search Collins's property and surrounding areas. Nothing. It was as if the man had evaporated. But Hayes knew better. Predators didn't vanish, they watched. They waited. That night, as Hayes drove home, headlights flared in his rearview mirror. Too close. Too steady. He turned left, the car followed. His pulse quickened. He pulled into a gas station abruptly, heart pounding, hand on his sidearm. But the car rolled past, disappearing into the rain. Hayes exhaled shakily, convincing himself it was nothing. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that Collins was already inside his orbit, closing in. The breakthrough came 2 days later. A patrol officer, combing through abandoned storage units near the industrial district, found something, a second trunk, identical to the first. Inside, more photographs, more women. But this box contained something else. A cassette tape. When Hayes pressed play, the hiss of static filled the room, followed by Collins's rasping voice. "They never suspected. Not once. Not in 78, not in 82, not in 94. They buried Margaret, but I buried them all. And now, Detective Hayes, I've buried you too." The tape clicked off. Hayes sat frozen. This wasn't just a killer. This was a man who enjoyed the game, who had been playing with police for decades. The pressure mounted. Media caught wind of the reopened Harper case. Headlines screamed, "Cold case killer at large," and "Detective targeted by serial predator." Hayes's phone buzzed relentlessly. Reporters, politicians, even his family begging him to step away. But stepping away wasn't an option. That night, Hayes returned to Harper Street one last time. The house stood in darkness, a silhouette against the streetlights. He entered cautiously, every nerve on edge. The basement door yawned open as if waiting. Descending the stairs, Hayes found something new. On the wall, scrawled in red paint, "Welcome home, Samuel." And beneath it, a fresh Polaroid pinned to the wood. It was a picture of Hayes himself, taken through the window of his own living room just the night before. His stomach turned to stone. Collins had been inside his world already, closer than Hayes ever imagined. The final confrontation came the following week. A tip led officers to an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town. Hayes insisted on going in first. The air reeked of decay. Dust swirled as his flashlight cut across peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. In the back room, the beam froze on a figure sitting perfectly still in a wooden chair. Richard Collins. His eyes were open, glazed, but his chest didn't move. Around his neck, a noose dangled, tied to the rafter above. The floor beneath his boots was littered with photographs. Every victim, every crime scene. A grotesque museum of his life's work. Pinned to his shirt was one final note. "They'll never believe you stopped me. Because the next one isn't mine." Hayes's hand trembled as he read the words. Outside, radios crackled with reports. Another body, fresh, across town. Same signature. Same method. But Collins was dead. Which meant one of two things. Either someone had been working with him all along, or the monster he created was still out there, carrying on his work. And the list Hayes found in that trunk? The one with his name written on it? It was no prophecy. It was a promise.